All right, let's get after it. What do you say, huh? Let's talk some SEC football and beyond because coincidentally, that's the name of our show. It's Dan Matthews, it's Chris Landry here with you to recap the week that was 11 in the SEC and around college football. And Chris, we're already starting to see some of the other pieces in college football move around just before me and you hitting the air. The beyond portion, which we can get into a little bit later on in the show, at least the rumblings of proposed moves down in Coral Gables at Miami sounds like it's already in motion, and we'll see what that means for the head coach because the AD, he gone.
Yeah, Blake James is gone, and it certainly now it's one of the things that will have to be decided on. Everybody will say, um, that the new guy. I don't know if they have an athletic director that's ready to come in. So let's just say that takes a couple of months to get done. I don't know. I mean, they may have somebody next week. But what does that mean for Manny Diaz? Well, many people think, well, that's it for Manny.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is, and I'm sure the president, board can decide move on from him, but that means are they going to hire the head coach? And then the
Right.
new athletic director is going to come in. So you wonder sometimes if, with all the money that they owe him, do they just punt this decision and say, we're going to hire the athletic director and let him assess it next year? I don't know. This could go both ways. This is really interesting. I'm sure they got a plan, but I don't know what the plan is. And the initial thought is, oh, that's it for Manny. It may be, but I don't know where that goes in the next step. That's going to be interesting. It's, if you remember, I will kind of go back into recent where you can make a mistake. You remember the whole Arkansas job was open and the floating out by Jimmy Sexton that Gus Malzahn is a prime candidate there, and they didn't have an athletic director.
Mm.
And the president was, you know, was they are so afraid, Dan, of being embarrassed by losing a coach.
Right.
It's perceived you let this guy go to another conference and you're in school. That's a sign like of weakness. When the reality is, I hate to say this, no disrespect to Gus, but you know, if you were them, I mean, and I was in that situation, I'd have said, I wouldn't have said it this way, but I would have said, "Oh God, oh please do go ahead." And, at alleviate. Instead, what did he do? Not only he went and doubled down and gave him a deal that they had to turn around and pay through the nose, and still are. So I wonder how this is going to play out, and this is something that Miami is going to have to decide. I know that's a little bit too much into the Miami off the top, but it just came into my mind. What does it really mean for them? And we've got a lot of that stuff going on now. Washington firing Jimmy Lake and
Mm-hmm.
a mess at Texas, which is not going to lead to a firing now, but it's already becoming a mess. And FIU, which I've got some thoughts on that later. So anyway, the coaching search stuff is it compiles a lot of my mind in my work this time of year. So we'll get into it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you were on a roll. I didn't want to stop you there. So, Chris, obviously, like you said, you're very busy this time of year with administrators, athletic directors, coaches, all everything alike of asking your opinion in situations like this. So, look forward to talking that with you as we move forward at the end of the season. You can follow him on Twitter, by the way. Do so if you are a football fan and you have a Twitter account. Absolutely do it. Or if you haven't started Twitter yet, go ahead, have one follow, and that's Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com, at Landry Football on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter as well if you're so inclined, at Dan Matthews ATL, 1T in Matthews there. And of course, you can watch us on Twitch. We appreciate it when you do, twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. And if you take in the show through the years on the podcast, then we appreciate you doing that as well. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast needs, that is where you can find our work here on SEC football and beyond. Chris, let's get right into it on the SEC portion of it because we will have some notes around college football in the beyond portion. But let's start first. Jimbo Fisher, yet again, being asked about the LSU job and shooting it down, saying he would have to be, quote, the dumbest human ever to leave the recruiting class that he has coming in and have to coach against them at another school. 24/7 Sports right now has the Aggies for the class of 2022 at 5th overall, 3rd in the SEC.
Yeah, look, My feeling has always been, and a lot of these searches are, and I know it's a tough job for the media, Dan. You're clued in as anybody, and you follow other media folks, and a lot of people do a good job. But one of the things that's difficult, and even kind of being involved in it, as you mentioned, is you got to really get it from both sides. I mean, so it's one thing you say, well, there's a search at school ABC or XYZ, and well, I hear this. Well, you're not verifying it over there. Well, Les Miles is going to get the Michigan job. Well, if you followed what was going on at Michigan, that was being played out a little bit differently. And, I, this has never been a thing. There's certainly, as I've said before, and I said it on your show with Chuck Oliver, if Jimbo Fisher wanted this job, he could have the job. That was never going to be something that came to realization, in my view. Now, I'm not going to speak for Jimbo. I'm gonna, but just based upon, people will say, "Oh, he convinced him to come from Florida State." You know as well as I do, he was looking for an exit strategy at Florida State, and he's been criticized for kind of letting go of the rope at Florida State, and that maybe a lot of that's justified. He was looking to leave Florida State, so it was he flirted with LSU, and it didn't work out. He got a little bit more, and obviously you got to want to leave. There is no indication that Jimbo wants to leave Texas Tech to go anywhere, and that includes LSU. Let me address this, Dan, because I know you go for people who maybe are kind of new. Dan, you can share you're got Louisiana ties, LSU ties, and you've been up all around.
What gave it
And,
away?
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I knew that before, but that gave it away for those that didn't know.
There you go.
And certainly, I grew up in South Louisiana, going to LSU games as a kid. When you didn't go to the games, Dan, you didn't see them because they were on TV. That's how old I am. And that's where I got that's where I went to school, and it's where I got my first job as a coach. And so it means a lot to me, and I think it's great. But let me address this. A lot of what the public and a lot of times the media thinks is a better job or not, it's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And what I mean by that is, what does people say, Dan? You've heard this a bunch. Well, that LSU job is better than A&M because there've been 3 coaches in the last 20 years have won a national title.
Mm.
That's exactly why most coaches would say A&M's a better job. And here's what I mean by that. Does A&M have everything resource-wise to win a championship? Yes. Are they positioned? Yes. If Jimbo, and I'm not saying this is the reason or the only reason why, or even the main reason why, but just so people understand, if you go to LSU, you're going to be expected to win a national championship. And I hate to put it this way, and I don't mean to be crude. I'll just clean it up and say, if you don't win a national championship at LSU, I don't know, the next 5 years, you know what they're going to say to whoever that is? Man, Les Miles and Ed Orgeron won national championships. You can't win one? That's what people are going to point to. And it's accurate, but it's also fair, unfair, whatever. The reality is, Jimbo knows this because Jimbo won a national title at Florida State. That's always going to be the statue is of Bobby Bowden, okay? That's Bobby Bowden's program. He knows LSU. He has an affinity there, and timing's everything in coaching searches. If he was still at Florida State, if Scott Woodard was the athletic director instead of Joe Alleva a few years ago, Jimbo Fisher would be the LSU coach today. I just tell you, he'd be the head coach at LSU today because it'd have been, meaning if Scott was not at A&M, but he had left Washington to come to LSU, the timing was it, he'd be at LSU right now. And he probably would not want to leave LSU to go on A&M. It's just the way it is. He's at A&M where he's got all the money. He's got anything he wants. Trust me, there's more money even there than LSU would ever have. The state and the boosters are bigger. But here's the thing, Dan. They expect him to win a national. They hope and they expect him to win a
They've already
national
given him a
championship.
trophy. They've already
Absolutely,
given him a trophy.
so
So
they expect
yeah,
it. But if and when he does it, it's going to be Jimbo, and I'm not saying he's doing it for the. It's going to be a Jimbo statue. He's going to be. It's going to be his program. He will have done something there that nobody's done. It's just like, that's the difference. Where in his eyes, he won't say this to be rude, but I'm telling you, a lot of coaches feel that way. They'd rather be at a place that hasn't done it but has all the resources. Now, if you don't have the resources, that's a different deal. A&M has better resources, believe it or not, than LSU. Other than you don't own the state of Texas like LSU
right.
owns Louisiana, but my goodness, anything that they want, he can get, and he can get it with easily raised money that, quite frankly, in Louisiana, I can tell you, I worked there at LSU. I always say this: you need $1 million, that's 5 phone calls and a little bit of arm twisting. They're raising a lot of money to buy out Ed Orgeron. It can be done. It's not as easy. At A&M, raising $50 million is pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal there. And so there's a lot of things. So I just keep that in mind is for, if it were me and I had my choice, well, it's LSU because it's my dad, it's my family, it's my upbringing, it's how we were. But, everybody says, and I always get a kick out of this when, media guy comes out and says, well, this is a better job. To whom? You ain't a candidate for either one. It's the best job in the eyes of the beholder. USC job, oh man, I love to live in Los Angeles and La La Land. That's great. The USC job, oh my God, I got to live in LA and the traffic and the cost of living. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's trash is somebody's treasure. Somebody's dream job is somebody's nightmare. It's different. And I just never have felt that there was really anything there. I think he's clearly said it. I think he's tried to be respectful. Sure, there have been contacts and issues. Heck, the agent that represents him represents some of the other guys that LSU's closely looking at. But that's my take on it. I can't sit there and say with 100% certainty that Jimbo would not do it, because the other thing is, what if there's a problem or anything at A&M that just meaning somebody, something. You never rule out anything, but I never thought that was much of anything, and I think he pretty much put it to bed. At least this, Dan, would you agree with this, that I don't think there's any turning back off of his comments today? I think
No,
I think he really kind of went down the path to where if something were to change, I think there was nothing to it. Hasn't been anything to it, and not that it needed to be put to bed in my mind. I think it's been put to bed in a lot of other people's mind.
well, a couple of things you touched on there. I think number one, recruiting. You're exactly right. I mean, in the state of Louisiana, if LSU wants a kid, more often than not, they're going to win. Now, we've seen times of players going out of state, going to some Texas schools, going to Georgia, going to Alabama. I mean, even guys from Baton Rouge, Chris, going to Alabama right out of their own backyard. Dylan Moses, one of those guys, most recently. So that's happened. There's no doubt about that. I think the other thing with Jimbo as well, there's unfinished business. I think he really feels like if the quarterback play had gone the way that he felt like it could have gone this year, I mean, I think that he would like to see what this offense can look like with Haynes King, because I do think that there have been some good things from Zach Calzada this year. I do think inconsistency has been a huge thing with him this year. And that's why I know that we're looking, cart ahead of the horse here, but I think LSU, if they win this week, they got an opportunity to be able to beat A&M next week because of their offensive inadequacies. So we'll talk about that when that show comes up. But I think that there is probably a feeling with some of the players that he has in his program that we're close. We're close. And this is not the time to ditch out and go look for the next job. I want to be here to see this through. And I don't know if it's next year. I don't know if it's the year after that, but I think he probably feels like at A&M, they're close.
Timing's everything. Timing's everything. If it's 4 or 5 years ago, like I said, he's right now we're talking about Jimbo Fisher, the head coach at LSU. Into the future, if it were like, things were running bad at A&M, well, he probably wouldn't be as high on the list there. But, um, timing's everything. It
Right.
is absolutely everything. And anybody can relate to that in jobs and opportunities. But in coaching, I see it all the time. I see it all the time. And no, so anyway, that's the latest there.
All right, so real quick here, Dan Mullen likely going to stick with Emory Jones at quarterback for the rest of the season. They've got Missouri on the road this weekend, and then they're home for Florida State in the finale. So one more win in order to reach the bowl game. It sounds like it's probably a combination of number one, he probably feels more comfortable with Emory Jones at quarterback, but also number two, Chris, I got to believe that Anthony Richardson is not as healthy as they're leading on.
That is healthy, and I know there is no one that wants to hear, anything positive about Dan, and he hasn't really given them much to be positive about. Is and always said, you're not there coaching them. Everybody said Anthony Richardson was the best option, and that may seem like that from snippets of game action and playmaking ability, and it's justifiable when you look at the mistake that Emory Jones makes, but pretty clear that of the two, one has a better grasp of what they're doing and one doesn't. I think the answer and the criticism should be that they don't really have a quarterback that's capable of running any sustainable offense there. Um, Real quick, and maybe this will kind of tie up Florida for us today. And I'm sure we'll talk about the game, but maybe we'll tie that. that was an ugly look. Let me just say this: there's a I have felt and believe that Dan is going to be back next year at Florida. Um, I'm not so sure now. I think
Really?
there is a possibility of an exit strategy. It's a little complex. I think this. I think that they're not going to fire him. I think that they're going to give him every chance to come back and fix it. Dan will have to do some soul searching, and this will require a number of things to fall into place. Contracts have a way of being worked out. You owe, and I forget, I'd have to look up Dan's number again. Let's just say it's 10 million owed. I
I
think
think
it's
it was
I, th- I,
12.
th- I think it's 12.
Yeah, I believe I saw
I,
12.
but there's a way to kind of make things go away and look at the number and come to the number. If Dan he's not going to, he shouldn't walk. I mean, he'd be foolish, as big of an ego as he has, even. He's not going to walk away from money.
Mm,
Um, but if he could have an exit strategy to go somewhere else and say be a coordinator in the NFL and split the money and make it work out to where he could save face, um, they've got some tough decisions right now because I think Dan, this is going to be a tough turnaround for him. I think we're clearly looking at, if we're next year in this situation, we're looking at him being gone. I
mm,
just think there's a way, if the money can be worked out, I've been told that there might be an exit strategy.
wow.
That is a lot of hoops to go through, though. And if you ask me, do I think he's going to be back? I'm going to say yes, because my experience is those hoops are complex. But if he could get, for example, enough of the money to where he doesn't have to go through what he's going through now next year, even worse, because it's only going to get worse, as you know, and he could escape with his ego intact and his pride intact, where, man, they fired him. He had one bad year, and
Right,
I think he would be amenable to that. He ain't gonna leave all that money on the table, though.
right.
So if Florida wants to make a move, but they don't want to really fire him, but they want to move on from him, and there is a way to make this work, and both sides are willing to come to the table to make that work. Now, Dan, as you know, you can come to the table, but what are you willing to pay, and
Right.
how bad do you want to move on? who could you get that you'd like to maybe secure this year, or how likely do you think you can get them? I think what I'm saying, there is a deal to be made, as complex as it would be. I'm told there's a deal to be made. Just in listening through it all out, I just think it's going to be a lot of hoops to go through. But let's just keep an eye out on that, because that was awful. And by the way, this is another example. I get it. When you look at Todd Grantham, it's bad. Fire the bum. I get all that stuff. Okay, but this is why when you make a move during the season, you think you're gonna fix it by letting him go now. It just stresses out the rest of the staff, and you have an
Mhm.
even worse performance. But this is what happens with this god awful college football calendar that we have. Because, and I've said this before, what do? You've got recruits asking and their families asking, is Coach Grantham going to be there next year?
Right.
Well, you either going to do one of two things now. Think about this, folks. I'm going to put you in our shoes as coach. No, he's not. We're going to let him go in 3 weeks. Well, you can't do that. Then it's going to get out there. That's not the way you let a coach go, right? Or you tell them, we're going to have to assess it, or you get and then it becomes
We do evaluations at the end of the
yeah, and,
season.
and it
Yeah.
becomes a little bit, well, okay, that's put offish, or you say yes, and then you turn around in 2 weeks and fire them. You lose. It puts people in a no-win situation, and I think that's bad. And this is one of the reasons why we're having more and more of that happening around the country. Head coach, it is to try to save the early recruiting
Yeah.
period, which is a mess in and of itself. But
Well, remember though, Chris, he said that recruiting season they were going to worry about it after the season. So
yeah, but
he doesn't have the.
they're recruiting all year round.
It
They just
wasn't. It
they just
wasn't a
don't
good look.
they just don't. No, it was a bad
Yeah.
comment. And I'm going to tell you something. I'll just say this. I'll throw this in. We may not get to it, but tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. Jimmy Lake was fired at Washington after 13 games.
Yeah.
Okay, got to pay him a lot of money. Why?
Mhm.
Well, made a bad hire to a friend on an offensive side of the ball that's been a disaster. John Donovan
Mhm.
has just been a disaster, that entire staff on recruiting. They are, I'm told, it's just been really bad. And looking at it, they just are all across the board, and they're lost recruiting wise. Sound familiar? Okay, sound familiar.
Mhm.
And then Jimmy Lake has had many missteps in the presentation in the media and press conferences, and he's had an issue with a player on the field, and then reportedly an issue last year with a player in the locker room at halftime. And so that part's a little bit different than Dan, but it's almost like the same story out west. It's
Yeah.
just it's just a little bit more with Jimmy. He hadn't had the success. Dan now has had. Look, they went and they played Alabama well and went to the conference championship game. So Dan's had more success, and Dan has had success at Mississippi State. So it's not exactly the same. But my point is this stuff moves awfully fast.
Yeah.
So Landry's not saying that Dan is gone at the end of the year. Landry's saying it's not 100% certain that he's coming back. Far from it. And we're going to see how it plays out, because there are a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely is, and I know that there's a lot of, but let's just say, let down expectations there
Oh, yeah.
in Gainesville, because I don't think that people necessarily, Chris, expected them to win the East this year, but they at least expected them to be competitive, and they have not been competitive this year. And we've seen the way that the season's gone to this point. I mean,
Well,
just
that
absolutely a
looked like a
non-factor in that game.
collapse. It looked like a
Yeah,
collapse Saturday, didn't it? And look,
no,
I'm gonna
it's not
throw
only
this
that.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna throw this out. They got Missouri and Florida State. We know how bad those teams are. But they played Sanford last week. I mean,
hmm
envision this conversation that we're having in 2 weeks, and they lose to
yeah.
Florida State.
Well, I mean, that's something that probably could propel what you're talking about right there because
It's
you got an FSU team who's going to be going up and taking on an improved and pretty decent Boston College team this week. But if they win that, you're telling me they're not going to be ripping and roaring going inside the swamp the following week with an opportunity to give themselves a 13th game in the way that they've played this season after starting off the year 0-4 and being able to run off what they've been able to do now, especially with a bad loss to Jacksonville State in there. That's something that I think Mike Norvell could very easily rally his guys going into that stadium for.
yeah, and it's not the loss; it's how it looks. It they didn't lose to Stetson, to Sanford,
Sanford, yeah.
to Stetson, Florida. Sanford. They didn't lose to him, but it was like a loss, and it looked like a complete disaster.
Mm.
And so, if it continues to look like that, then they're going to have to look and say, "Oh my God,
Is this repairable?
how do we fix this?" It's
Yeah.
almost like you go in. I hate to be dramatic, but you go in and you think, "Well, we can fix that," or you go in and say, "Oh my God, we're just going to have to bulldoze it and start over." I mean, it's one of those things that becomes, and this is kind of what I'm getting, and this is why I would say the next two games, believe it or not, are really important. They're really important showing signs that, okay, look, there's a lot of work to be done, but the studs and the framework are there. We're going to go forward, or they're going to take a bulldozer to it. I mean, it really is along those lines of what's going on in Gainesville right now.
Yeah, it's not a good time to be inside the building there in Gainesville. There's no doubt about that. We're going to get to the Jake Peets story here when we talk LSU here in just a few minutes. But, Chris, I want to get into the games now as this weekend saw some really good ones, saw some that were not so great. This one, though, Georgia on the road at Tennessee, complete domination once again. But stop me if you've heard this story before. Stetson Bennett, okay, not great. 17 to 29, 213 yards and a touchdown. James Cook was the offensive stalwart for Georgia in this game. 10 carries, 104 yards, a touchdown, and he also has a touchdown catch as well, three catches for 43 yards. I think we're kind of setting up to a point right here, Chris, where it's going to be, if it's not the SEC championship game, if it's the semifinal game or even the national title game, a reverse Tua, which I'm sure Georgia fans would say, it'd be nice to be on the other side of that this time. I just don't look at Stetson Bennett on the field, Chris, and say, this guy can get it done. I'm sorry, I don't.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think the one thing that comes to mind, at least right now, as I survey everything and I'm looking at this, I just think there's such a huge gap between Georgia and everybody else. I don't know that I can sit there and stamp the thought that they can't win a national championship with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. I think this Georgia team could probably win the national championship with Stetson. JT, I really do. But does he give them the best opportunity? I think it is a interesting conversation because they're so good. We know how good they are defensively, but let's talk about the backs. James Cook had his best game he's had since he's been there. I thought the receivers came up with some big catches. I think the offensive line has really done a good job. I think Matt Luke's done a really good job. I thought Xavier Truss played well. This is such a really good team that they don't need the quarterback to be anything more than just solid. And even if they miss throws and leave plays on the field, we got plenty of others that we dominate. To your point, is it going to be a situation where they're going to need more from the quarterback position to win? And if they do, we don't know, and we're not going to know until at the very earliest against Alabama, because I think it's going to be Alabama. And I recognize they got to beat Arkansas this week or Auburn, but I think that path is a little bit easier for now without Bo Nix. But be that as it may, I think that could be one of those games in which Alabama plays loose, plays their best game, play the underdog role, which they're going to love because they never get to play it, right? They'll be what? Huge underdogs to Georgia. We might.
The number I saw today, and I don't know who had it, but guys around the station were talking about it.
10-ish?
It'd be Georgia 3.
Georgia 3. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Georgia -3. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I think that's going to be interesting to see if anybody can challenge Georgia enough to where they're going to need more out of the passing game, because I do think they leave some plays on the field, but it doesn't really affect it because they're winning and they're dominant. I don't know. The one thing that he can do, and we saw this come to help, is he doesn't put the ball in harm's way and he doesn't force the ball. He misses some plays, but he can run it. And I think they kind of like that part of it, because I think in some of those cases, JT's maybe throwing it, maybe not throwing it away. Maybe it's a turnover, and maybe it doesn't cost them a game, but it might make some of these games closer. But we're not going to have the answer. The answer is going to be that they're so much better than everybody else that they're going to win it regardless who the quarterback is, or they're going to be in a close game and they're going to have to get it done. Kind of like in basketball when you got a dominant team and they don't play a close games, and you say, man, can you make the 3 throws down the stretch?
Right.
Well, we don't know. They never have to. I mean, then they get in a close.
2006.
Yeah, gonna get a close game. Got to make some free throws, and all of a sudden it gets a little tight. And then all of a sudden there you go. In a football standpoint, if somebody gets a lead on them, and I'm not talking about Tennessee first quarter, that's one thing. I'm talking, as I said, can Tennessee get a 17-3 lead? Well, no, they couldn't. But if they did, and it's not in the first half, but if it's like 3 minutes left in the third quarter and Tennessee's got the ball and Georgia's defense has been on a while, or whoever's got the ball in this case going forward, that's what we don't know because we haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you what, they've taken every challenge and shot it down. And I don't know that anybody right now looks good enough to really challenge it. And I know a lot of people have hit me up. Wouldn't you like to see this Ohio State offense against Georgia? Yeah. I don't know if they're good enough to get enough done, but that's probably the best going offense right now that has the personnel to challenge and at least make it a game. I don't think the defense holds up as well, but maybe it does if Georgia's offense is not eclectic enough in the pass game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing. I think that you bring up a very valid point that if you do find this team behind and they say, we got to get something going in the passing game, I do wonder if that's when Kirby says, JT, you're in, get it going. So I think that that's something that he's hoping that he doesn't have that situation, because if he's still getting outstanding play by his offensive line, I mean, I'm sure people have seen it now. I think it was Cedric Van Pran that had a block on the second level and just absolutely killed someone in that game. I mean, this has been an offensive line that has played angry all season long, Chris. And to your point, Matt Luke has done an outstanding job with that group, because you really had to remake that offensive line to start the season. And they did. They haven't done a ton of rotations in there because, I mean, yeah, you've had Jamari Sawyer out for some time, but for the most part, they've been able to plug and play and really be able to make sure that that group up front controls the line of scrimmage. And I can't point to a time this year where you say, man, they had their work cut out for them that day. I think for the most part, they've been pretty outstanding for most of the season. So that's a huge feather in the cap for them. Alabama over New Mexico State, 59-3. That's my contribution.
Yeah, dominant. Just did everything that you'd want to do, and now it's moving on. I think the big story, though, and we'll get into it, is, can they deal with the physicality of Arkansas this week? And then obviously that Auburn game. They just need to win one now. And obviously with the A&M loss, one win away, just need one win as Alabama to wrap up the West. But they look good as you expect they would look good. They were down 3-0, though.
Yeah.
3-0.
They had to punt it away, and I know that Nick was asked about that in the post-game press conference, and he was not too enthused with the question about it of having to punt it and then give up the field goal, which was very short lived for them, as we knew that it would be. So that's our conversation on Alabama and New Mexico State. Ole Miss over Texas A&M, 29-19. Zach Calzada, a couple of key interceptions, one taken back the other way. Jerry Ely, huge for Ole Miss in this game, almost 200 yards of total offense himself, as the Rebels looked really good in this one, as we thought they could, because I think, Chris, the question that we had, and I know that I had about this game, was can you get enough good things out of Zach Calzada to be able to win? Because I said that's what you are going to need. And we found out, no, you couldn't, because it wasn't exactly like Matt Corral lit things up, but he made less mistakes, and less mistakes means that you win by 10.
Well, to me, where I missed a little bit, or in the question I had, I thought the key to the game was going into it was I thought A&M would be able to run the football better than they were able to run against Ole Miss, and they couldn't. I thought that DJ Durkin and that defensive group of Ole Miss really caused problems in the first half in particular, and that's the key. Because to me, Calzada's not going to make consistent plays other than the start against Alabama. He is what he is. So the only way that he's going to make plays is if they're running it so well that they can create some spacing, move the safeties in the box. Look, A&M's defense, my God, what an effort. Ole Miss moved the football a lot of yards, but Ole Miss couldn't get it done in the red zone. A&M just stop after stop after stop. When it was 13-0, Dan, it really should have been 20, 24, maybe even 27-0 Ole Miss in the first half. And it was A&M's defense coming up big after big. Now, for Ole Miss standpoint, well, we left plays with A&M's defense really took it away and kept themselves in the game. And I thought great second half, great halftime adjustments. A&M got their running game going a little bit. They really did a good job tightening their line splits a little bit. Did a nice job. And you saw they made a few plays in the passing game then because they're able to run it. But, man, they couldn't get it done enough, and I thought the defense is going to be out once the defense, A&M's defense on the field a little too much at some point. And it was just Ole Miss making a couple of plays on defense, including one that obviously a big pick. It's just simple as that. This A&M passing game is not good enough. They're going to have to run it to set up the passing game. And Calzada, at this stage, he's got a lot of physical talent. But at this stage, they don't have a quarterback that is good enough to be able to go, boy, put the game on. We're going to go no huddle. We're going to go quick pace, go make some plays. Can't do that. That's not what he can do. And at this stage, he's too young to do it and maybe limited even down the road in doing it. It's just not the formula for them to have success. So it's, again, if they can run it, they establish it. Look, against Auburn, Auburn's offense wasn't going to jump out and make plays, and that game was close to the vest. So A&M's defense scores some points, gives them a short field, and A&M's offense didn't do much against Auburn. They did just enough. But the issue in a game where you're playing a great offense, which I think Ole Miss's is, if you're A&M, the challenge is you're going to have to score some points because you can do everything you can. And by God, I mean, look how good they did against this Ole Miss. Again, it should have been 24-27, at least 20-0, and it could have been a blowout in the first half. Then the game is completely over. But the defense kept them in. I don't think A&M, you can ask more out of that defense against this type of an offense. If they play this type of an offensive team, they're going to have trouble. They had trouble against Mississippi State, which has a different offense, but an offense that throws it a bunch, scores it a bunch. They lost both of these games because they can't keep up enough offensively. And so Jimbo's getting a ton of criticism. I get it. It's this passing game, this quarterback, it's not good enough. And I think the feeling is we're going to look, because they just accept that that the Alabama game was a given, but
Mhm.
the reality is they think you're wasting a great emphasis on great defense. A defense that still to this point is playing about as good as anybody not named Georgia. In the SEC, I think Wisconsin is to what they do is almost as good, but they're not able. If they can keep the game close and allow their offense to grind it out, run it, they can win it. But if they get into where they got to score a lot of points and make plays in the passing game,
Yeah.
it's not what they do well.
I don't think they're there yet. I'm with you on that. I think that it's also too. I mean, as we've seen from Jimbo Fisher's offensive scheme, Chris, they want to run the football first and foremost. They want to be able to beat you physically and then be able to soften you up and go that route. And I think that that's ideally what they want to be able to do first. And they just haven't been able to do that. And you're exactly right. I mean, Jalen Weidemeyer is a fantastic player. It's kind of the same situation that I see locally with the Falcons is you ask Jalen Weidemeyer to be the guy, kind of like what the Falcons in essence right now are asking Kyle Pitts to be the guy, and just don't know if they're there yet as players. So I think that you have that. I think that that's probably something that is going to need to improve for them over the offseason is being able to improve the receiver room and be able to get some options. And then also, too, I think that a year of playing for Zach Calzada because guts, I don't think he lacks guts. I think
No.
he's got plenty of those. I think that he's somebody that probably could you really use the bowl practices, the spring practices, and just the enhanced film study for him to be able to look at some of the mistakes that he made this year and be a much improved player because I do think that he has the ability to play at this level and play at a high level. I think that he just needs to be able to learn from some of his mistakes and see that on tape and be able to work on it on the practice field to be able to become the quarterback that I think Jimbo Fisher wants him to be. Because I got to tell you, Chris, I think he has got a lot of the same intangibles that we saw to Sean McGuire at Florida State. He's better than Sean McGuire, but that was somebody who played with guts, who just was able to take control of that team and lead them for a team that probably had no business even playing in a New Year's Six bowl game that year, but lead them to play in a New Year's Six bowl game. And I think that that's the type of talent that Zach Calzada has. So we'll see if indeed the offseason is kind to him. You mentioned Mississippi State. What a comeback for them. 43-34 win over Auburn on the Plains. The Bulldogs scoring 33 points in the second half to win this one. We also find out later that Bo Nix, broken ankle, done for the season as he tried to gut it out for his guys on the other side. But Will Rogers, have a day for yourself. 6 touchdown passes, 415 yards for Rogers. Don't look now, Chris, but all of a sudden, it's looking like a team who was going to need to be able to get on their horse and try to make bowl season. Well, now they're 6-4, and they've got Tennessee State this week. That's not going to be an issue for them. I think this could be a bad matchup next week for Ole Miss. So we're all of a sudden talking about a coach who some people wondered, is he starting to kind of fall out of favor in Starkville to a, hey, he could finish 8-4, wins over A&M at their place, come back win like this over Auburn, and then you also win the Egg Bowl. All of a sudden, hey, let's see how this plays out here. This looks like it could be pretty promising.
Look, I think the narrative on Mike, to me, it hasn't changed in my view. This is Mike. First of all, I'm sitting there and I thought this game had a chance to go either way. It was like 2 games in one, and I was surprised by both. I was shocked that it was 28-3, and then I was shocked that came back and was like, that game was not anything like I thought it would be.
Bad number.
I thought it would be close, and I thought it'd be competitive. I just did not the game and the style and what have you. But this is Mike Leach in a nutshell. That game is Mike Leach in a nutshell. I've seen him come back from games. I also saw him blow a 40-point lead in one quarter to UCLA. 4-0. 40 points. It seems impossible. Why is that? He throws it all the time. So, in the first half, they drop balls and boom, boom, boom. You're down 28-3. You catch balls, but it's his
Yeah.
style. It always lends it to in-game inconsistency and game-to-game inconsistency. This to me is not an upset. It was a close game, and like I said on Friday's show, a little bit of an edge to Auburn because they were at home. But I could have gone. But this was a 2 games in 1. You're going to get that with Mike. Look, if you're a Mississippi State fan, depending on the schedule and how things play, you're good to win 7 to 8 and maybe even 9 games. I think Mike can be a great fit there for just doing just that. He's going to surprise you and win a game, at least 1, if not 2 a year, that you don't think he's going to win. He's also going to blow 2 games that there's no business losing. So it's going to always be that. You know, people like to have the consistency, right, Dan? Get to 7 and then get to 9 wins, and you see that, well, the 3 teams that you lose, they're better. And you're going to get better, and now you can get to 10. You won't get that with Mike. It's going to be up and down the recruiting. It's the quarterback that has to hit. Will Rogers hits. If it doesn't hit, well, let's remind folks, and I know LSU's talented, but they lost to LSU in the middle of the LSU's dysfunction. This is what you're going to get with Mike. This is a Louisiana Tech. Now, it was early in the year, and I get all that. This is what you're going to get. They're very capable of going. And by the way, how good's the Egg Bowl look on Thanksgiving night? I'm gonna get me a turkey sandwich and a piece of pecan pie and love some of that for the Egg Bowl. I think it's a good game. This year it's going to be a really good game because I think both can take care of it sets up well. And what I love about it is both of these guys love offenses. Both of these guys anything can happen in this game. But this is what you're going to get with Mike. You're going to get hey, this is a big upset because I don't think it's a big upset. I think Auburn's done a good job. Mississippi State beat A&M this year. Lost to LSU. Again, you're going to get that. So if you are a Mississippi State fan and you don't mind the roller coaster, you don't mind the frustration of blowing a game or 2, you're going to be fine. Now, again, this is why, though, if he went to a place, Dan Mullen, going to Florida, that's why, because everybody says, boy, Mike would be a good, you put him at Florida. No, you put him at Florida, it would be Dan Mullen 2.0. Because he would not recruit well, because he doesn't recruit all that well. And then he'd blow those games that you can't blow at Florida. You can't blow at an LSU or a Georgia. But at Mississippi State, they'll live with it if you win 8 games a year.
I got a scenario for you. We'll talk about it in the Beyond section with Blake James getting fired.
Oh,
we all know that we all know that Mike is a huge fan of Key West, Florida. I don't know how far Coral Gables is to Key West, Florida, but you think if Miami came calling and said, "Hey, why don't you come back to South Florida?" I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. We could talk about it a little bit later on. Of course, there is a man still on the job.
How about that? How about that? Would he and what I throw in? Would another guy that likes South Florida, that coaches in the SEC in the state of Mississippi, would entertain that?
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think these are questions to ask. It's also too, how good does Miami want their program to be? So I think all of those questions need to be asked and answered at the moment. Arkansas over LSU in overtime, 16-13. Chris, where I want to go with this is we saw the quick hook for Max Johnson, and it was very apparent. Let's see what Garrett Nussmeier has. Some good. I think there was a lot of high school ball there as well of, here, let me wiggle my way out of trouble here. Jack Besh, let me throw it up to you. And Jack Besh being what he has been this season, outstanding and being able to high point the football and bring in that touchdown catch. So that was nice to see. The interceptions were not nice to see, and especially when they came for this LSU team, that was not nice to see. But this started to make its rounds on social media on Saturday night. Blake Ruffino, a guy that you know pretty well, I believe it was his "Are You Serious?" on Twitter. They threw this out that Tom Hart said the quarterbacks did not have a great week of practice, according to Jake Peetz, offensive coordinator who was in the booth. In fact, on Wednesday, he was so upset, he left them with a script and said, quote, practice is over. You guys need to stay out here and keep running things. And they did. Well, Ed Ogeron on Monday asked during his press conference about Jake Peetz. Ed Ogeron, the one thing I did was trust Joe Brady because that's exactly what he had pretty much done. Hey, Joe, who would you recommend? I'd recommend these two guys. Great. Awesome. We'll bring them in. I knew there'd be a learning curve. That's red flag number one. I won't say it was a mistake. It's not like they're not looking. It's just their experience level may not be what I wanted for this job. Those watching on Twitch can see that I'm looking at you. I am purposely laying out, as we say in this business, for your reaction. The floor is yours.
It just the lack of polish and the certain etiquette of how to deal with it would be like this would be the in the coaching profession the version of somebody coming in for Thanksgiving dinner to your house and just not washing their hands and just starting to serve themselves the casseroles and everything, just grabbing it by the hand and throw it in their plate.
Ripping the turkey leg off.
Yeah, rip the turkey leg off. But even worse than that, grabbing the green bean casserole with the fried onions or whatever that crap is that, throwing it.
Oh, it's great stuff.
Great,
great
just
stuff.
throwing it. Just his no filter. Look, a couple of things. I did check in. I did check into it. Actually, talk with somebody. I did on the telecast. I don't know that they did the best job. Let's because I think this is important. You can criticize a coach for just not getting it done, but when you criticize a coach for basically like somebody putting out there that the coach left in the middle of practice,
right?
That's irresponsible. That's irresponsible because that did not happen. He did not leave in the middle of practice at all. Okay. And that's important to know. That's so the way it works, and it is typical when you get done with practice, coaches have to go for meetings. In college, you got to go up and look at the tape. You've got a limit with a 20-hour work week. You can't just spend an extra half an hour with them. It's illegal.
Right.
Okay. And none of those guys are going to do anything that's illegal with everybody watching right now.
Right.
So they didn't have a good day. And he told them, from what I'm told, look, Jake Peetz, it is. Look, you guys need to work a little bit extra on this. So he left the script with them, work on this, and they made it sound like, look, I've got enough of you. Yeah, I got enough of you guys. Yeah. Here, you do it yourself. Look, there's plenty enough to criticize stuff that's going on at LSU without. Look, I don't think people are making it up. They're just not smart enough to understand what goes on at practice in a typical practice. And so I think this is, let's get some clicks to talk about how the coach just left in the middle of practice. It's kind of like this is the same exaggeration of, did you hear Ed Orgeron had his girlfriend's children taking reps in practice? Well, that wasn't true. He had some, I guess, a girlfriend, a couple of kids that were there. And before practice or after practice, or maybe a combination of both, were throwing the ball around and that stuff. That happens quite a bit. But they made it sound like, Keishon Butte, okay, all right, Keishon, hold on. We're going to get this. That's not. Anybody that has a clue, to me, this stuff is so ridiculous. I think it's unfortunate, but my God, what is that doing with the comments, throwing somebody on? What an embarrassing thing to do. It's such a low rent thing. I don't know. I mean, Ed's not going to get a head coaching job in the future, but what a jackass thing to say about a coach. You protect your coaches. You take – I mean, it's like basically, I'm gone. Let me tell you all the ways. It's like what he did.
Yeah.
I didn't interview Bo Pelini thinking that, that's why it's bad.
That's what it is.
Sorry, you didn't interview him? And instead of realizing and being sharp enough to say, You're the bleeping head coach and you didn't interview the guy?
Interview, yeah.
It makes you look like a bigger idiot. He doesn't think things through enough to realize that what he just did, throwing another one of his coaches under the bus, and then, of course, is going to say, a buck stops with me. No, it doesn't, Dad. You know,
Clearly not.
it doesn't stop with you because, you're just running everybody over, and backing them up under the bus. And, I mean, it's just not the way you handle it. But, again, it's all part of the reason why he's lacked the polish and the finesse to be a head coach. And, yes, it goes to show you that even guys like that, can sometimes it can work for a short term, like it did in 2019, when everybody else is doing it and he can just not have to do anything. But when he has to become involved, or when the people underneath him are not doing it as well as they do it, then he can't fix it. It's what I've always said. In anything in life, and certainly in coaching, it's about consistency, and there's no consistency with that. There's no rhyme or reason why he does it, who he starts, who he plays, who he hires. It's just whatever he hears last, whatever idea he has last. It's unbelievable. He also said today, talking about the 4-3 defense and how, well, in the 4-3 defense, it's hard to stop the run. He fired Dave Aranda because Ed wanted to run a 4-3 defense, and so he got rid of Dave Aranda. It's like he doesn't even know or understand what he said, and he's just, whatever happens, it's just we have a saying down in South Louisiana, which and it's just, God bless him. Just God bless him.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. I've said too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Usually when somebody throws that at you, God bless you. It's like, what have I done? What did I do? How did I step in it? So no, it's something that probably I think that you probably do have parts of LSU fans who say, all right, one last game, a 13th game, make it to a bowl would be nice. I think you also have a lot too, Chris, who would just say, let's just end this crap show as soon as possible and move on to the next thing. Because it looks like that guy over across the street at the Pete Maravich Center, it looks like that Will Wade's going to have a pretty good basketball team, so that'll suffice. And then already looking like Jay Johnson with the #1 recruiting class across the street at Alex Box Stadium, that he's going to get that thing going on a pretty quick path as well. So I think if nothing else, it's all right. Let's focus on the other positives and let's hopefully have a positive and a hired head coach. Real quick before we move on to the last couple of games here on the slate this week for LSU, what's your confidence level Thanksgiving weekend? We're hearing about a hire.
Oh, I think it depends. I think there's still a couple of people that could be involved that we're dealing with. Conference championship game possibility. So the answer to that is tied to who's in the conference championship games, who's available, timing. So I would say that there's a possibility, but it's probably depending upon what happens maybe the week after. Conference championship week, because remember, Thanksgiving holidays is the end of the season, and I think it's the right type of guy, or the right guy that's in the mix. It's not going to wait after the bowl season, of course, but if it is somebody that's still in the conference championship game situation, that's going to wait to another week.
Gotcha.
And that's where I think it's headed. So I can't answer that.
Yeah, interesting. We'll have to see, and of course, you'll have to obviously pay attention to what's happening conference championship game race wise to see how to connect the dots on that. Real quick, let's just get through these last three before we get to a few on the Beyond segment of the show, and then we've got some great questions too. By the way, in the chat here for the mailbag, Florida over Samford 70-52. Give up 42 points in the first half, only give up 10 in the second, so good news there. But you had to score 35 points too, Chris, to be able to even win this one.
Yeah, the defense was completely out of sorts. I was, again, to go back to what we piggybacked off, or the biggest thing to take out of the game was the defensive struggles. And again, you lose a lot of, and I know people say, well, you got to move on from him, move on. Well, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get an even bigger disaster. And the biggest thing is, I just look at Dan pulling his guys, talking to them on the game field, and it was like half the guys weren't even listening. It's things like that bother you a lot. And so, and then, I look, a lot's made out of the dancing
Yeah.
in the locker
I didn't
room.
have a
Now,
problem with that.
I didn't know. No, when I saw it, the first thing I said was, well, this is not after the game. I just thought it was a generic
Right.
something
Right.
that happened last year. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't, but when things are going bad, Dan,
Yeah.
really? You're celebrating several. You gave up 52 bleeping points. You know where this is all
It's
part of the negativity. So I just think a good finish is in order to calm the waters. I think
yeah.
the vitriol is just so high over there
Right.
because they don't know. There are a lot of people that in their mind there's no justification to bring him back. In their fine, and people that are not just saying just average fan, but a lot of people that are that that are of the opinion that are very influential people with the program think this is not going to work. It's just a matter of time, and that's where I think they're going to have to figure this out.
Right.
Dan, what is the plan? What's your plan to fix this? What can we do to help you? How is it going to work? He's going to have to sell them, and there's going to have to be complete buy-in. This are steps A through Z, how we're going to fix this going forward, and this is what we're going to do. And if there's not a complete buy-in, or they just don't, as we use the Southern term, G-haul on how they're going to get together, I don't see this lasting to next year. If you can't put the plan together, then I think you have to move on and you have to make the money work for both sides. I just think that we're not there yet. We don't have that answer. That come to Jesus meeting hasn't quite had it yet. There've been some fire and brimstone meetings, from what I understand, but not the meeting, the
Where it's like
full come to Jesus meeting.
you better do this or else. Yeah. Real quick on the dancing, I understand what's at play there. It's when you're in a football locker room, it is one of those things. If you've been losing for 3, 4 weeks in a row, I've seen this more on the pro side, Chris, where it's the entire building feels it, where it's not fun to come in and you pass the coach in the hallway on the way to the cafeteria or whatever, and you don't get a hello or anything. You just get just a straight ahead, let me ignore everybody and go to my work. So I think there's a little bit of that. I think it was, hey, you know what? You won, you earned it, blow off the steam here. Let's do the 24 hours thing and then let's come back to it. I wasn't as necessarily nonplussed about it. Mizzou over South Carolina 31-28. Mizzou, one of those schools that really needed one this last weekend.
Hey, run defense showed up a little bit. Congrats. Good job, Mizzou. They did it a little bit. And Tyler Batty. I can go into 9 minutes of diatribe. No one wants to hear it. That's the key to the victory for the Como Tigers. Yeah. Look, they've got Tyler Batty. That's the difference there, and the difference in the game. So, yeah, for all the talk about South Carolina and turning around, I love it. That was the difference in the game.
Kentucky 34-17 over Vanderbilt. That's another one that needed to have a bounce back.
Yeah, you kind of, that was one of the more sound. I thought that the offense was really solid for Kentucky, and the defense, beat up Ken Sears and the entire quarterbacks were in trouble the entire game. So I think for Kentucky, it's about finishing off. They get New Mexico State, too. It's been softened up by Bama. And then New Mexico State. Man, I hope those checks cash quick.
Yeah.
Good Lord. And then they got Louisville at the end of the year to finish off, which, it would be really ugly if they ended. I hate to say this. That would be an ugly 8-4 if they were to lose to Louisville. But
I agree.
From where they were. But no, I think they take care of business, and I think they're a little bit frustrated, but at least they'll win, I think, strong.
Well, there was a thought too that this was going to be a team that was bound for the Sugar Bowl, and now probably you're looking at a team that's going to be in an Outback Bowl or what's the one down in Orlando, the Citrus Bowl or
Citrus
something
Bowl.
like that. That's what it looks like you're going to be doing when you thought that New Year's Six was on the horizon for you. So I get the
Yeah.
frustration. There's no doubt. All right, real quick, because like I said, we've got a lot of really good questions in the mailbag to close out this one. Texas, what a mess. As I pointed to earlier in talking with you, that Steve Sarkisian on Monday saying that he expects 33 new scholarship players in his program. I think that they are going to be hunting the transfer portal like nobody's business. I don't necessarily know if there's going to be much change there. I guess we'll have to see what happens with Jeff Banks and all of his goofiness off the field with the therapy monkey. And well, we'll just leave it there. But just everything at Texas. And Chris, I'm starting to already see of some people wondering, is this it for Sark? I think that's a little premature and pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. Look, it's if they don't fix the culture there, it's going to be it for Sark in a couple of years or whenever. I mean, the clock's ticking. They've got to figure out there that the problem is not a play caller, somebody who can fix the offense, somebody that can do a little bit better job on defense. It's how can we finish games better? It's all tied to culture. It's been that way. It's been a soft culture. It's been a sense of entitlement since the latter stages of Mac Brown and ever since. And
Mm-hmm.
if they don't, you need to have strong leadership. Now, the one thing I question about Sark is he the type of strong-willed guy that's going to stand up and clean up the mess? It's great, getting 33 different players. Is he going to hold up? Are they going to back him? Is he going to have leadership there? I mean, those are the type of things. Is he the strong-willed type of guy? Tom Herman was not. I don't know that Sark's personality is that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they need even if they need somebody that's going to stick their foot where it needs to be on certain folks to get things righted. It goes back to how they have done things in the past, where they've been a lot of kind of the attitude of we're Texas, we're good, and we've arrived. All you've gotten by going on the 40 acres is an opportunity to be a good football player and to be a good team. You haven't arrived anywhere when you go on campus. That's a starting point. Okay, it's a launching pad. It's not an arrival. It's a frustrating look. Let this sink in. Texas 4-1, leading 31-20. I may have the numbers a little bit wrong against Oklahoma.
Right.
4
They had a big lead. Yeah.
Big lead to Oklahoma. That's where they were. They've lost 5 straight. Folks, 1956, Darrell Royal hadn't left state to go to Texas yet. That's the last time they've lost 5 games in a row. Incredible. It's incredible. And that is not about, well, we need to recruit better. It's not about, well, we need to call better plays. Well, it's not about, you've got to fix a culture of problems that has been systemic there for a long time. It's not an easy fix, and I don't know if Sark can fix it. Only time's going to tell. They need to figure out that they're not getting the right type of guys and they're not giving the right type of support to fix it. They think throwing money will fix everything. It doesn't. It just, you can buy out more contracts and throw out big money. You've got to be able to understand that there's no shortcuts to building a championship caliber program. And they haven't had it for a long time. They haven't had it since the early tenure of Mac, when he could handle all the shenanigans and get that team to focus. And then he lost it, and he lost it because they became lazy as a staff. And they became guys that would commit 20 guys in the junior recruiting class, in March, and they didn't do their homework on studying the film. They offered guys too quick. They recruited off of stars, and they didn't do their homework, and they made mistakes in evaluation and recruiting, and it led to that, and it's become a bigger and bigger problem, and it hasn't been fixed since.
All right, real quick before we move on to the mailbag, just a couple of quick mentions here. Butch Davis out at Florida International, not going to be back there. Says the administration was sabotaging the program. Chris telling the Action Network such on Monday, saying that they had 9-year-old jerseys. They couldn't get on the road and recruit for the last couple of years.
Yep.
And also, too, had been using old Mississippi State pads at their programs. So
that's right.
All of those things, not
it's embarrassing.
Necessarily. Yeah,
and the bigger story here is how I will use the word criminal it is for programs like this to be playing mercenary games. It's which part of needs to be done in college football reform. When you got New Mexico State having to play Alabama and Kentucky back to back, that's not good for college football. We've got to figure out a way that these programs can sustain and funnel money to them without having kids that have to do this. This at FIU is an embarrassment. You can't recruit. You're having very nice of Mississippi State to give them pads and all. How embarrassing! Look, you have to go and put them in a different level where you have less scholarships and you can compete in a different level. Let them compete on a level that they were. I had a coach that coached at Louisiana Monroe a while back. Good friend. And, he got the head coaching job. They played Colorado when Colorado was really good. They played – who did they play? They played 4 teams. They got the doors blown off of them. And, how is that good? And then, of course, in 3 years, they fired the guy. Well, you know the record. What? I don't want to say it. What the bleep do you think?
Right.
Play a schedule that you can compete. And I just think it's asinine, that you play with the best thing. You put them in a league where you can play for some sort of a championship or a title. Wouldn't it be great if you're New Mexico State and you can play Louisiana Lafayette, Louisiana Monroe, and do something to where you could compete for some sort of a title or a conference, something that meaningful. But you're going to go and get beat up, and this is ridiculous. It's embarrassing. To have a guy that's as proven, as good a coach as he's been, to put him through that. And you know what? He obviously bit his tongue for a long time, but when they decided to go ahead and fire him, he said, you know what? Maybe it's fine that I won't bite my tongue any longer. Let me tell you what really goes on here. And that happens an awful lot. And to me, it's really frustrating because dealing with administrators sometimes – I'm glad it's a Zoom call because I'm not quite sure I'd handle it quite as well if I could grab my hand around their neck, Neil. I think and against some of these guys, I would just grab Dan and just shake them.
Yeah, no, sometimes, it's one of those things. Hey, do you get it? Do you understand it? And that's kind of frustrating. Blake James out at Miami. We touched on a little bit early on in the show as the AD for the Hurricanes. Let's get to some of the questions here in the mailbag. Jeffrey Parrott, I'll go ahead and allow it because I think we are looking forward to this. Like we said, Thanksgiving night, I'll be coming back from the Cowboys-Raiders game. I'm going to be in North Texas for that. So I'll be at that one and then hopefully be able to settle in front of a TV for the Egg Bowl. What are your early thoughts on the Egg Bowl? And can Mississippi State actually win this game?
Oh, absolutely. This is a toss-up game. I think we need to see the health of both teams. I see it as I mentioned earlier, a great game. These games are often a lot of fun. They have some weird things that happen sometimes in these games, even when they don't have a lot on the line. We've seen coaches lose jobs here. That's not going to be the case this year, but we've seen a lot of that stuff in the past. We've seen players do things in the end zone that are probably not appropriate and rehabilitate. And it's just become really a lot of fun. I like it. And I think it's given a lot of exposure to a game that, if it was on conference championship weekend on Saturday at 1 o'clock or 11:30 or 11 o'clock, it wouldn't get as much notice. I think it's great. So I'm excited because I think both of these teams are good. I think a even bigger bowl game is going to be at stake. And, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Can't wait.
Spartan Barton wants to know, are Florida boosters in danger of creating dysfunction similar to Texas?
It's not quite the same, but look, I would say this: that when you have a bad hire and a bad hire and a bad hire, I mean, I think I would make the comparison. It's a different problem at Texas. What I would say is Florida in danger of going through coaches and making bad hire to do along the lines of what Tennessee has done. That's maybe a more apt comparison, but I just think Dan has not been as good a fit from a recruiting standpoint. They need to be careful with it, because I think another bad hire. I don't see this as, look. Will wasn't a good fit. I think Jim McElwain wasn't as good a fit. I mean, I think they got a little bit cute with a few of their hires. Zucker wasn't. Obviously, he was about the fourth, fifth choice. Look, I think that's a really good job. I think they like all the Florida programs did, Miami and Florida State, they lived on, we've got all this talent around us, and they got lazy with their facilities. And so now, if you go to Florida, this might surprise you folks. If you go to Florida, they're trying to catch up, and they're going to do it. They're doing it right now. They've got it all worked to where they're going to get the facilities upgrades. But you go to Georgia and you go to Florida and you see they ain't the same. So they fell behind, like Florida
Mhm.
State fell behind. And so, look, I think that Florida's still an elite job. They're getting an elite coach because they're not like as far behind, and they can the Bull Gators that they established, Charlie Pell established years ago. They got more money than say Florida State, but they haven't done as good a job with their facilities. They're getting there. They'll get a good coach if they move on from Dan this year and next year. But yeah, if they make another bad hire, it could
Mhm.
always end up being, well, man, look at that. Look at what Tennessee's done. It's not that they should have kept on to Phil Fulmer at Tennessee, is that they made mistake after mistake. And part of it was one and done for Lane Kiffin at a late time where they hired Derek Dooley, which set him back, and another hire, which set him back. And then that's where I could see it going if they continue to make bad hires.
Woodshed King talking about watching the Sanford game this last weekend, and Russ Callaway, somebody that made a name for himself at Sanford this weekend, and wanted to know if you could shed some light on why he left LSU and whether he would have been a better choice for offensive coordinator for the Tigers.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's a number of the whole issue with the offensive coordinator. They were trying to again rebuild the Joe Brady tree, and that's what they went with again. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people that would have been better fits there as for LSU in their decisions, but yeah, certainly watching them run right up and down Florida was quite interesting. Says a lot about though Florida's misalignments. It was really bad defensively.
A couple of final ones from Spartan Barton. Number one, does Baylor have a chance to make the playoff now? And he even threw out when we were talking about if indeed Texas ever did make a change here in the next couple of years, would they do the Urban Meyer thing?
Oh, they would think big in doing that. Now I can tell you that they did um, make a phone call at least to explore Urban Meyer. And Urban, I can tell you this: Urban is not real big on the transfer portal and where college football is. But again, the Jacksonville situation, how long that'll last. If he if he wants to coach again, would he consider something like that? He might, and he's probably the type of guy that they need that would just be a culture changer guy. But health and timing and circumstances, I wouldn't rule that out because I think again they made that call. He wasn't interested, so we'll see if they revisit that. Baylor does not have a chance to make the playoffs. No,
Okay.
they're out. They've got two games. They've lost TCU. They've lost Oklahoma State. The only team in the Big 12 that's got a chance is, well, I think Oklahoma State at home in Stillwater. If they win, they've got a chance. But to me, when I look at it, and I've done this, and I'll mention this. If you look at it, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, if they win out, and I think they're going to have a hard time beating Utah twice, but those are the three teams. Okay. I think if 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 Oregon does lose out or lose to Utah, you've got Oklahoma State, or one-loss Big 12. Let's just call it a one-loss Big 12 champion, because that's what it's going to take. A two-loss Baylor, no, is out. But a one-loss Big 12 champion. So to me, it's only Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. And I know Oklahoma doesn't look like it, and I don't think they will, but it's them, it's Cincinnati. If Oregon loses, folks, I'm just throwing it out there. If Alabama loses close to Georgia, if there's a two-loss team and Alabama plays Georgia to where it looks like there's not a whole lot that separates them, I just, again, you're talking a situation where Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, if they lose, you've got Cincinnati. What if Oklahoma State loses? You're telling me who's going to be ranked higher? A one-loss Big 12 champion, Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, or Alabama? Because, again, if Oregon loses out, you got Georgia, Ohio State. Cincinnati's probably in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to start looking at this now as to, can you find four? Can you find four? Really, think about it. Can you truly find four teams at this point? Well, right now you can. But I think in a couple of weeks we might not be able to find four. Georgia, I think, is in, even if they lose the conference championship game. I think Ohio State's in because I think they beat Michigan State and Michigan, and I think they win the Big Ten championship game. A lot of ifs there, but I think they do. Those two are the most sound to me. Then I think it's wide open. Certainly Alabama's in if they win the SEC championship. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they lose close, well, then what if Oregon loses once? Okay, then Cincinnati would get in. Well, then that leaves you three. That leaves you Ohio State. That leaves you Georgia. That leaves you Cincinnati. Well, again, you've got a one-loss Oklahoma State, a one-loss Oklahoma, a two-loss Alabama if they play Georgia close. I mean, I don't know what the committee is going to do. I'm just saying that's food for thought. I think the team that's the best two-loss team that has a chance would be Alabama, because they have a chance to play Georgia, play them well, and that, to me, the optics might put them in as a fourth seed, if nothing else. Or if Georgia wins, it might put them as a 3 seed and keep Georgia and Alabama away from one another. That's how I see it. I'm not selling Alabama as a two-loss team in it. I'm just saying we might have a lot more two-loss teams than you think we're going to have right now. And I'm not saying that a two-loss Alabama gets in over an unbeaten Cincinnati. I'm saying Cincinnati might get in by default under that scenario, because Oregon may play their way out of it. I think if Oregon wins out, I think they're in. I think Ohio State's in. I think Georgia's in. Then I could probably see Cincinnati getting in over a two-loss Alabama. But I'm saying that I think we're going to have much more chaos between now and the end of the year.
Well, it'll be fun to pay close attention to. There's no doubt about that as we get through the final weekends of the college football season. He's Chris Landry. I'm Dan Matthews. Thank you all for sticking around with us here on SEC Football and Beyond. We will talk to you later on in the week.